So, so I'm Kevin Caves. I work out of the U.S. in North Carolina with the Duke ALS Clinic, and we have a lot of our team here with us. Don't hold Trump against us. We are not happy about it either, to a person. Okay, so how many people know what 3D printing, you've heard of it? If you've heard of it, raise your hand. Have you seen something 3D printed? Okay, have you done 3D printing? No. Why not? These things are cheap and easy. Okay. So the first question is, what is 3D printing? So 3D printing is what's called an additive manufacturing process. So if some of you know what machining is, you take a block of metal and you cut away all the pieces that you don't need until you're left with a part. So a lot of things are machined, things on your cars, things in your refrigerator. The difference in 3D printing is that instead of taking material away, you start with nothing and you add material until you get the part that you want. So what's cool about 3D printing is that it enables the creation of real objects from electronic files. So you can draw something in a 3D CAD software and then quickly, relatively, create that object. So the kind that I have access to and that I use most, and most people use, is something called FDM, which is fused deposition modeling. And that's basically, you take some plastic, you put it through a hot, like a glue gun, and you just layer upon layer create your object. And it's not, oh, there we go. Create your object by building up layers of material. So the process for doing it, I'm not going to talk about how, but the basic process is that you create a drawing, and there's lots and lots and lots of 3D printing software tools, SolidWorks, Inventor, Fusion, but some of you might be familiar with something called SketchUp. That's a Google product that you can use to do drawings. SketchUp now has the ability to create a 3D model, which you then export to a printable format, and the printable format that most printers use is something called an STL file. So it's like your .doc, a .stl is something that the printer can use. Once you have an STL file, you do something called slicing, and I have no idea why they chose these names for things, but to slice something is to prepare it, the file to be read by the printer. And then once you've sliced your drawing, your STL file, you can then send it to the printer and print. Okay? So, so you don't have to know how to draw, or be able to draw, or have access to the drawing files. You can find objects, and that's why I said this is how you can use things in your practice. So there are websites that people put up their STL files, their drawings, that you can then download and then take somewhere to print. So they've already done the drawing for you, created the STL file that you then slice for the printer. So websites like Thingiverse and GrabCAD are two of the biggest. Another one called Sketchfab is pretty popular, but you can go on those websites and do a search for objects. So here are a couple, which one is the laser? There we go. So this is an adapted key holder to make it a little easier to hold. Here's a bag holder that doesn't require you to use your hands, and here's a device that helps somebody push down on the knife to cut through whatever they're cutting. So those are already out there and available, so you can go and find files to print. Okay? And then the next thing you got to do is where do you print your STL once you found it? So in the US, 3D printers used to be really expensive. They're still expensive, but you can get one for about $2,500 US, or you can get less capable ones for even less than that, for just a couple $100s. But in the US, a lot of our libraries have 3D printers now. This was a big push within the past couple of years to provide 3D printing capability. Colleges, we have, this is a picture of our 60, some of the 60 3D printers that we have in our innovation studio space that's available to all folks at Duke, at the university. You don't have to be an engineer, you don't have to be a student, anyone can print there. So if you know somebody at a college, you can give them an STL file and they can probably print something for you. A lot of high schools in our area and junior highs now have 3D printing capability, as well as maker spaces, which are places where hackers get together and they do stuff like this. It's not unusual to have to pay for your 3D print, but it's really pretty inexpensive. The libraries around us charge about 25 cents a gram for material. So just talk about some of the devices that we've made. I'm missing a slide. Let me just check. Yeah, I missed a slide. It was my cool slide. Let's go back. Here we go. Let's go back to the, no, it's not moving. There we go. Okay, so this is a 3D printer printing. This is used in the fused deposition modeling. So that little head that's wiggling around has a heater in it. It heats to about 237 degrees Celsius. And it squirts this stream of material out to create the part. So this, as you can tell, that's sped up. But this is the part that's being created. So this is a parts for a mount that can clamp onto a table. And then I'll show a picture of it in a minute. But this is sped up. So this is 229 to actually print, but that's 2 hours, 29 minutes, not 2 minutes, 29 seconds. So this little piece took almost 3 hours to print. So that's not uncommon. So it's going to take longer than you think to print it. So again, you'll create a drawing, you'll prep it for printing, you'll send it to the printer and print and wait and wait and wait. Then you'll pull your piece off, and then you'll check it and find out what you did wrong, and you'll go back and fix it and reprint it. The other thing is that prints will often fail. So you'll go and you'll have a printer jam on your printer. Those are pretty rare nowadays. These are like the early days of laser printers or even dot matrix printers where they fail a lot. So you'll have, in our innovation studio, they say that about half of their prints fail. And it could be because the nozzle jams, the feed doesn't work right, it goes too far and skips a layer. So know that you might have to do it several times. Okay, create a drawing, print, here's objects to print. Fine, but wasn't that worth going back for though? Okay, so objects we've created. So this is the thing in the middle is our mount. And this, the 3D printed part at the base allows us to use this lock line stuff, and lock line is a tool and die material for shooting cooling fluid onto materials, but it's really nice in that it's flexible, and unlike a gooseneck, you move it and it stays in place. It doesn't spring back. So we're able to put really light switches like the microlight on them and have an inexpensive way to get a switch in front of somebody. The next step is to start 3D printing switches so that we can avoid the $110 microlight switch. Okay, this is another switch. I teach a class where in engineering where we design products for people with disabilities, and one of the therapists had a problem where she had a kid with cerebral palsy who was independent, but he couldn't press the buttons, those buttons on his walker to unlock it so he could fold it. So she thought that would be a project, but this took me about 20 minutes to draw and 3 prints before I had it right. But this is something that clips over the bar, and what he does is he just twists them, and it pushes the buttons in so that he can fold it. And then when he wants to undo it, he just unlatches it, and then it snaps back. So again, they were thinking that might be a semester-long project, but it really took about an hour and a half, kind of start to finish. And then the last thing over here is was the start of it for me. This is a call bell. So we used to provide, you can go to our big box hardware stores and purchase a replacement doorbell for your house. So if your doorbell breaks, you just take this thing, stick it on the outside of your house, and then it has a wireless connection to a doorbell that you stick on the inside of your house. And when you push the button, you get a ding. So one of the problems that folks have is from a caregiver standpoint is I don't feel like I can ever leave my person with motor neuron disease. So we would provide them with the doorbell and then modify it by opening it up and figuring out, drilling a hole in the case and soldering wires onto the board, and then you could plug a standard ability switch into it, and the person then could do that with whatever body part they could. So a lot of our folks can press a switch like this, but can't press this button. So at one point, as I started to play with the 3D printing, I realized, that this button was essentially the same. So what we did is built a little 3D printed box that you just put the button on the inside of, like that, put the cap on it, and we tell them to go buy this $13 doorbell, and we're now passing these things out in ALS Clinic. We give a couple each week away to clients. So it's an easy thing. People have been pretty happy with it, and it justifies my expense of a $2,500 printer. So that's it. I'm happy to share any of this. If you'd like to see what a 3D print looks like coming fresh off the print, you can come. I'm going to be over at Ferryman's in about 30 minutes. But I'll have these, and actually I'm willing to give these away to anybody, kind of a first come, first serve. But you can see that this is a base layer that puts down, and then I've got this little stringy stuff. That's the filament that gets printed. But this is just to kind of show what the device looks like as it comes off the printer.
Great. Thank you, Kevin.
Oh, and you can also print iDrive-O-Matic things. So those are, when you go to the iDrive-O-Matic site, the STLs for printing out those parts are up there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. So do we have questions for Kevin? I've got one at the front. Alison?
Thank you. Really interesting. I'm totally inspired by this. In my field of long-term ventilation, have you made any client-specific custom-made masks on your 3D printer?
No, I haven't been asked for that. We've used this gray mount though to hold the Cascade.
Yeah.
To make something to hold the Cascade.
Can you see a role for that? Because we've heard that 3D printing could be used in that application. Do you think it could? Is that
Sure.
something? Yeah.
Yeah. So 3D, you can do almost anything with it. The downsides of 3D printing versus what you probably would get from a commercial mask that you would buy is that the way that it's created in layers it's not as strong as something what's called injection molded. So if you take this is the same kind of plastic they use in injection molding, but basically they heat it up to a really high temperature, they squirt it into the mold under high pressure, and then it all solidifies at once. So there's not that layering of it. So injection molded parts are much stronger. So the problem I could possibly see is that in the clips where you hook the straps on, is that those may not be as strong as an injection molded thing. But yeah, if somebody needed a special device with special fitting, you could probably do that with 3D printing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a question up at the back.
Hello, I'm Angelique Swinkels. I'm a rehabilitation specialist from the Netherlands. It's not a goal of this Congress, but there's also 3D printing, for example, artificial hands. When people have loss of hands, part of hands, you can actually print some parts, put them together, and use that hand.
Right, there's an e-enable project where there's whole 3D printing, there's whole communities set up around 3D printing hands. And I've got a colleague over at UNC, and that's one of the projects that they do. They've taken on the 3D printing of hands. So that's pretty cool.
Ron?
Don't know if this is possible, but have you ever looked into or have you worked with or tried to create something for neck support, which is one of the biggest issues ever?
PTs. So we've got several things that we work with in our clinic that I don't know that anybody's super happy with anything that's there. So one of the nice things about 3D printing is if you had an idea for it and you wanted to say, oh, I'd like to see how this headmaster would work if the supports were further out, that's something that you could do with 3D printing. Or if you had somebody who had a fixed contracture that you were trying to accommodate, maybe you could look at 3D printing that. Yeah. So it's a way of being able to make something and not have to wait to get it back. Yeah. Good idea.
Thank you. And anyone else? No?
Cool.
Okay, well, thanks once again, Kevin, for a fascinating presentation.